Good evening, everyone. Today's the 25th of September. It's about going on 8 o'clock. This is going to be a short 30-minute broadcast. We tried to do a broadcast yesterday, and it ended up being a little over an hour, and my computer locked up on me. So we're going to try to keep this at 30 minutes. And I'm going to just kind of invite you all to yeah, that feels good. I'm going to leave that on. I'm going to invite you all to listen to this morning's devotional as a kind of a prep before you. I would encourage you to listen to that before you listen to this, because it covers a lot of the material that is leading up to this broadcast. Again, like I stated yesterday, which you didn't hear, Walt Stickle brought this book up from Oregon, and he laid it on over there at the side, and I picked it up, and I'll never be the same again since reading this Ark and the Dove by Ives. This Ark and the Dove, real simply, is a 3-volume book in one, written about the Jesuit activities. Book 1 is entitled The Antecedents and Preparations. Number 2 is called The Planting. And number 3 is called The Harvest. And why don't you explain to our listeners what each of those books represent?
I'd like to have you, Larry, explain the first book, The Antecedents
Okay.
and Preparations. Explain that word to us.
Okay. Well, of course, antecedent means the beginnings, or again, that's why it says preparation, something before it happens. And there was plans to bring Jesuit people over here to plant, and so this is the preparations, the plans to bring people over here to establish some Jesuit missions. And they certainly did do that, and you'll see that in the second book. And, there was a very early attempts at the Catholics migrating over here as early, and they did as early as the late 1500s and early 1600s. And this goes through, and they see America as the promised land, meaning that it was ripe for the pickings to seed it with Roman Catholicism. And so that's really what that's about. And book 2, I'll have Walt kind of go into that a little bit.
Well, book 2 is called The Planting. Here's some of the chapters. The Landing of the Pilgrims, Old St. Mary's, Christian Heathen Neighbors, Real Religious Liberty, The Exercise of Self-Government. I'm just going to skip down to 10, the Jesuit Baltimore Controversy. J. Moss Ives, wouldn't you say, Larry, that he was a historian, a Catholic historian?
Right, and he was also, I think, very much a Jesuit sympathizer.
Yes. In other words, these 3 books explain, and the third chapter is the harvest. In other words, they came over here before the American Revolution. Here's some of the titles. Chapter 1, From Baltimore to Carroll. Charles Carroll of, how do you pronounce that? Dorigan?
Yeah.
Charles Carroll of Carrollton, preparing for the independence, supporting the revolution, John Carroll, James Wilson, and Daniel Carroll. The First Amendment, the 10th Amendment. In other words, all we're trying to do is, it's the history that we have has, a lot of it has been rewritten. Most of the history of that has just been left out of history. And one of the key factors to understand the founding of America, during the 13 colonies, less than 1% were Roman Catholic. The Roman Catholics were not allowed to build chapels, to say the Mass in public. And they weren't allowed to hold civil power. All we're trying, the thing we're trying to start anybody's research, is the real history is very interesting, because you can see what has transpired since 1776, and we're in full harvest in 2021.
Yes, and Walt has often asked the question, who benefited most from the American Revolution? And if you read this book, you'll find out who in fact benefited most. It was the Roman Catholic Church. Because when they came up with the universal document, the Constitution, it opened the door for Roman Catholicism to openly practice and recruit, and they recruited a lot of Native Americans to start with into their religion. And as a result of that, they began to seed not only missions and chapels, but they began to start schools, and then they went on to colleges and universities, and then they went to law schools, and then they ended up with a number of their people in the Supreme Court of the United States. And we now see today that they are the majority. The Roman Catholics hold the majority seats in the Supreme Court of the United States. I believe it's like 9 out of 11.
No, it's 6 out of 9. But
6 out of 9. Right.
6 out of 9, and I believe, in Donald Trump, when he was in office, he was able to select 3 Supreme Court justices, and all 3 were Roman Catholic. So I'm not, George, if you're watching this, listening to this, I believe that 7 out of 9 are Catholic. It was 6 out of 9. But explain the Supreme Court to the state Supreme. Who rules over who?
Well, the federal court takes precedence, supreme. That's why they call it Supreme Court of the Land. And it supersedes all other courts, including state, county, and local jurisdictions. And, as an example, in my case, Phillips versus the state of Missouri, that's why we took it to federal court, because the federal court took precedence over the state of Missouri court. And we ended up in the Court of Appeals, the state of Missouri. The federal court was presented, and now we see, as we've gone full circle, that's why there's all this talk about, jamming the courts. I guess the word isn't jam, but they want to bring more and more and more, I believe, Roman Catholic influence into the Supreme Court of the Land. And this is also why we see open borders now. All these people pouring in from Mexico. By the way, Mexico is the second most inhabited country of Roman Catholics. Like I said this morning, that represents, next to Brazil, Mexico is number 2. Mexico has 110 million. Brazil has 172 million. You know, the Philippines has 83 million. And then number four, of course, is United States with 72 million, Italy with 58 million, France with 48 million, Colombia with 45 million, Spain with 43 million, Congo with 43 million, Argentina with 40.8 million. And when you listen to those numbers, that's why I called this devotional this morning, The Beast Has Risen. We have total proliferation throughout the world of Roman Catholicism. And that's why Walt says that you cannot have a complete gospel without knowing who the enemy is. Why does John on the Isle of Patmos reveal, well, Christ revealed it to him. Why does he reveal to us the enemy, the woman that rides the beast? I believe that it was revealed to us, the Christians, so that we would be prepared for such a time as this. So it would be very evidently clear. You know, we see in 2 Thessalonians that it says very clearly that he sits in the temple of God and he proclaims that he is God. Who does that sound like? That sounds like the Vicar of Christ, Pontifex Maximus, you know. And so we do not give honor to the Pope. We, like Ian Paisley a number of years ago, we call him out for what he is. He's Antichrist, and he's been Antichrist represented in every Pope down through the centuries, you know. And a lot of people have accused Walt and I of being Pope busters or Catholic bashers. We're merely, like I said this morning in that passage in Timothy, says that there will come a time when they will no longer endure sound doctrine, but they will heap unto themselves teachers having itching ears. So, Walt, you know, you about 10 years ago, or I don't know, you tell me how long ago it's been, but you started a website called GrandDesignExposed.com. And I want to encourage everyone that hears this broadcast to go to Grand, GrandDezigned, Design, 2 Ds, Grand Designed, I guess it's 3 Ds, GrandDesigned.com. And the first
Grand Design Exposed.
GrandDesignExposed.com. Thank you. GrandDesignExposed.com. And go to the first page. That's enough to get your boat loaded. That'll get you started, okay? Because there's so many links there. The gospel of Jesus Christ is on the first page of that website, okay? And I would highly encourage you to look at that and do your research. I was just reading tonight in a little booklet that Walt put together. What's the title of that booklet?
Vatican Jesuit Global Conspiracy.
The Vatican Jesuit Global Conspiracy. It's chock full of information that I didn't know. Not only regarding the Founding Fathers, not only regarding the absolute blasphemy that was put out by John Adams, who was a Unitarian. A lot of people call John Adams a Christian. A lot of information that Thomas Jefferson put out. It also exposes George Washington and the fact that he was a Roman Catholic sympathizer, and it also talks about in that book the influence of the Jesuits, the military arm of the Catholic Church. What was it, Walt, that brought you to a point of spending time in putting that book together? There's many authors represented. Talk a little bit about that book.
Well, it all started with a PDF file that Ronald Cook has a pamphlet that's called The Jesuit Vatican Global Conspiracy. And I just added authors and other sources that connect everything that he said. And I want to go back to, how many, there were 72 million in America.
Right.
But that's not counting the evangelicals.
That's right. That's right.
And the, the country that was the most beast influence, because the evangelicals have been overtaken
That's right.
with Billy Graham. And
By the way, the definition of the new evangelicals are to merge in a synthesis, okay, uh, fundamentalism with liberal philosophy, to merge them together. Do we see that happening today, Walt? I mean, my goodness. You know, if you listen to a modern day new evangelical talk, they will be the first to promote Roman Catholicism, and they will use references of Catholics, Roman Catholics. And a friend of mine, Adiola from Canada, he went to a luncheon at a church, and they were reading out of this book at the luncheon. And at the end, the person reading the book says, that article was by Ignatius Loyola. Ignatius Loyola was the one who started the Jesuit order, the military arm of the Roman Catholic Church. And the Jesuit order was created for one reason, and one reason alone: Counter Reformation. And by the way,
that's what the American Revolution is about.
Did you all hear that?
It's a Counter Reformation.
Dave Baxter, thank you, Dave Baxter. As Dave Baxter said one time, we were doing a conference call, and I believe it was God inspired. Dave Baxter said, you know what the American Revolution was and is? It was a Counter Reformation. Wow. Well, that's what it was. It was coming against the Protestants. They're not Protestants, they're Protestants.
Well, I want to say too, everything that we're sharing here right now, you can go to granddesignexposed.com and you'll see the book. I haven't, since the Windows has been changing from Windows 7 to 8 and stuff. See, I used to be pretty handy with JAS 8, a photo program, but because of the new programs, JAS 8 don't work. So, I have to learn a whole new photo program, but the photo on that book should get a Nobel Peace Prize.
Why don't we, Rosette, can you hand us that book, the Global Jesuit, and we'll try to get you a picture of that book here while we're talking. I thought I had it, but I guess
there it is. We've got it.
Oh, okay. I'll try to get you a good shot on this.
Yes.
Get you up close here. The Vatican Jesuit Global Conspiracy.
Hold it right there too, Larry. And that picture was on the cover of Washington in the Lap of Rome in 1888 by Justin Fulton. I took that picture. And the reason why you see 2015 on there is that's when Pope Francis came over here and talked to a joint session of Congress in 2015. But understand, the picture was produced in 1888. It shows the serpent going around capturing the Capitol.
And of course, Walt interjected Pope Francis in the middle of it.
Yeah. Okay. No, of course, that was not Pope Francis was not in the book,
Right.
But and one thing I didn't give credit for here, and I should have done, that back cover comes from the preface of that book, of Washington in the Lap of Rome in 1688 by Chris Pinto. Those two popes are in their busts inside of the House of Representatives.
Right.
And you know, inside the House of Representatives are the busts of two Roman Catholic popes. And not just any two popes, but the two men responsible for founding the Great Inquisition, a movement unlike any other horror recorded in the history of mankind, worse than the Holocaust of World War II, for it gripped all of Europe with terror for nearly 600 years. Yet, this was inserted inside of the house, and Chris Pinto knew when he was making the documentary "The Hidden Faith of the Founding Fathers." He got inside the House of Representatives to do some photo work. And in 1949 and 1950, a series of relief portraits over the gallery doors in the House chambers were added to the interior of the U.S. Capitol that were intended to depict historical figures noted for their work in establishing the principles that underline American law, canon law. So the thing that that we're we are amateur historians. In other words, because real history is not being taught. It's not being. This is fact. These two busts were put in there in 1949 to 1950.
Yeah, and I want because we're running close on time, and I want on this first broadcast we got about 7 minutes left. Walt Stickle introduced me to a concept called the Royal Declaration, and the Royal Declaration is where the king or queen had to agree to this oath before they started their reign. They had to take this declaration, and Walt has asked me to read it, and I'm going to read it and then see where we're at on time. Again, the king or queen, whenever they began to reign, they had to take this oath before they were allowed to begin their reign.
Their coronation.
I, by the grace of God, king or queen, whatever the case would be, of England, Scotland, and Ireland, defender of the faith, do solemnly and sincerely in the presence of God profess, testify, and declare that I do believe that in the sacrament of the Lord's Supper there is not any transubstantiation of the elements of bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ at or after the consecration thereof by any person whatsoever, and that the invocation or adoration of the Virgin Mary or any other saint and the sacrifice of the Mass, as they are now used in the Church of Rome, are superstitious and idolatrous. And I do solemnly, in the presence of God, profess, testify, and declare that I do make this declaration, and every part thereof, in the plain and ordinary sense of the word, read unto me, as they are commonly understood by English Protestants, without any evasion, equivocation, or mental reservation whatsoever, without any dispensation already granted me by the Pope or any other authority or person whatsoever, without any hope of any such dispensation from any person or authority whatsoever, without thinking that I am or can be acquitted before God or man or absolved of this declaration or any part thereof, although the Pope or any other person or persons or power whatsoever should dispense with or annul the same, or declare that it was null and void from the beginning. Now, this royal declaration was an affirmation by the king or queen that they would uphold the biblical instructions taught by Protestants against the Roman Catholic Church.
Now, they said that up to 1910.
1910. Now, what happened in 1776 in this country? That was done away with, because we now have a universal document, a constitution, that says that all men are born and created equal. Okay? And they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and so on.
That means the Pope.
That means also that we no longer are under a monarchy, but we're under a anarchy. Okay, and look at what we've got going on today. Now we're just about out of time. I'm going to let Walt bring this to a conclusion. We got about 5 minutes, 4 minutes left, and then we'll do a second broadcast tomorrow to bring this to a final conclusion before Walt heads back to good old Bandon, Oregon. Go ahead, Brother Walt.
Well, who benefited from the American Revolution? What was the motive? Who benefited? It wasn't the Protestants. As soon as we had the Constitution and the Bill of Rights with freedom of religion, Rome had them all. And today, we have 28 Jesuit universities, 244 Catholic institutions, colleges, and 50 Jesuit high schools. I mean, the academia, and not only, but it's not just Catholics that go to Jesuit universities. I mean, they're the prestige universities. Your lawyers, your doctors. Anthony Fauci went to St. Regis High School in Manhattan, Jesuit high school, and of course he went on to and Anthony Fauci has worked with 5 presidents. That's how Rome rules. I mean, Anthony Fauci has been whispering into the ears of 5 presidents, and so the thing of it is it's when you understand this, it's offensive to a lot of people. We're not trying to be offending, but Rome rules.
And it's totally in contrary to the gospel. The gospel is, by grace are you saved through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. The Roman Catholic system is a system of works.
And I should have had this, or maybe I can read it tomorrow. Michael de Semblin. There's 2 parts of the gospel. One that made the Protestant Reformation explode, and one was, for by grace you are saved through faith. It's not of yourself, it's a gift of God. And the second was, every reformer to the man knew who the Antichrist was. And that's the reason why the original 13 colonies, they didn't allow them to have civil power, because that's when you allow Rome to have civil power, you're going to have a pandemic, you're going to have masks, you're going to have vaccines.
Mandatory. We will get started. It's hard to shut up, but we will continue this tomorrow in part 2, and will probably be tomorrow afternoon. And we hope that this has been a good introduction to tomorrow's broadcast. And please listen to this morning's devotional. God bless.
Good night.